Good afternoon and welcome to Disabled People's Channel's first ever broadcast, and I'm very proud to be here presenting it. My name is Michelle, and very little bit about me. I have dyslexia, and you can find me on Twitter at Dyslexic Rant. However, don't try spelling dyslexic the way it's spelt, because as a dyslexic person I can't spell it the way it's spelt. So just look up Dyslexic Rant and eventually you'll find me. And just kind of to keep you in the picture, there's three of us here today who are going to be sharing some of our stories. So I'm going to hand you over now and introduce you to Damon.
Hi, I'm Damon. I have epilepsy, which started with me when I was about 23 years old. And it started off really, I had it with losing speech. And I'm now 44, and it's only last year that they, for the first time, recognized that I actually had epilepsy. Because it's gradually got worse and worse, to the point where now I lose speech and awareness, and my concentration and focus, and it's got extremely poor, and so I'm really stuck now when it comes to communicating and things like that.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And I'm now going to introduce you on screen, so we've got a screen in the room with us, to James, who's coming in from Devon.
Hello, all right. Yeah, coming in from Devon here. No, my name is James. I've lived with multiple sclerosis since I was about 20, so I'm 54 now. I blog on, I have a website called disabledchef.com. Which tries to integrate recipes for people using fresh herb. We got and many others, and yes, the athletes be invited to be on the show today, first show, and to discuss issues and questions what coming from watching. So, and yeah, done a lot in life, so it's going to be good to hear what we've got to say.
Okay, can I just, you probably don't know, James, but I think our connection got a little bit lost. So after you talked about your blog, The Disabled Chef, I think we lost a connection, so we might have lost a few things about you. So I'm just going to ask you to repeat that, please.
Do you want me to do it again?
Yeah, not the whole thing,
no
just if you can remember from Disabled Chef, because I think you write for a few newspapers,
yeah,
is that right?
I'll try not. As I said, my name's James. I've recently moved down to Devon from London, where I lived for 30 years. I live with multiple sclerosis. I've had it for most of my adult life. I'm now 54 years of age. I run a website called thedisabledchef.com, which is there to integrate recipe, ingredients, save money, but make you eat really healthily, which I think is really important. Because anyone, even with a disability, you've got to fuel your body correctly and pay the right price as well. And I also write for The Guardian on disability issues. I've had several articles published with them. I've done a few things in my life. I've sold doorknobs, I've worked in charities, I've cycled in a hand cycle from Edinburgh to London to raise money for MS. I carried the Olympic torch in 2012. So
you've got a good CV there.
Yes, it's an honour to be invited to the first show on this channel, and it's going to be great to hear what questions people have about disability and how they deal with it and how they get on with their life. And that's about it, really. So I'm all ears and all ears and eyes.
All right, wonderful. So I'm then going to come to you,
Yeah.
Damon, and I'm going to ask you kind of if you talk a little bit about your experience of epilepsy, because we did have a little bit of a pre-talk, and I know
Yeah.
that there's some things you've brought up which I thought were really interesting about your own understanding
Yeah.
of epilepsy.
Well, epilepsy is quite a. I've learned is that it's actually quite unique to each person, which people don't really understand. They actually, when they talk here about epilepsy, when I heard about epilepsy years ago, before I'd even had it, I thought, well, it's somebody shakes, falls down, and that's what it was. Whereas me, I don't. If I have a seizure, I won't fall on the ground. I'll just continue. I might just step back, and but my seizures are quite different. I can have them. I'll often have them when I'm sleeping, and then they can be more intense, and they can affect me for quite a long time, and then I'll get up and go for a walk without even being aware of it. So sleepwalking.
So do you need to have someone stay with you at home?
Well,
because of that, do you need to have a carer?
some people say yes,
Or
some people say no, but I like to. I don't. I choose not to. Technically, I could, but I suppose. I mean, I have 1 or 2 seizures a day, but they last for 2 minutes. And right now, for most of the time, when I have a seizure, it's 2 minutes. I'll stand where I am. I'll maybe just shake my arms, and then I'll carry on walking afterwards. So people don't actually know what is actually happening. That they're just thinking that I'm having some sort of losing awareness for a moment and going on. They don't actually realize that I'm having a seizure of some kind. But so, I mean, you might say yes, you might say no. I can harm myself. I can, but I have actually found that I have never actually fallen down stairs or anything like. I mean, I have never actually hurt myself.
We've got a question coming in. I'm going to need it.
Reading. Yeah, I can read it.
Jill's going to come in from behind the scenes.
It's easier. From Joanna Penn, asking, what are your thoughts on negative experiences of police when reporting hate crime?
Oh, well, I could go there if that's all right, because I've had hate crime and I've been stalked. And what is my experience of working with the police is they're absolutely disengaged, don't care, and actually just think it's all made up in your head. And I also have a mental health condition, and when I was being stalked and everything else, and I had witnesses to being stalked, I stupidly went to the police station by myself, and the police decided that what they would do is they would call an ambulance and try and get me sectioned. So I think, I don't know, perhaps anyone else would like to.
Well, I've actually had something. I've had something similar because I had a seizure when I was on just a 2-minute seizure, which I was sitting on the train, and then I was coming off the train. They actually thought I was a criminal in some way. I actually can't remember exactly what happened because the side effect of this is memory too. But I know that they pulled me off the train and stuck me in a room, and they kept me there for about an hour, and they wanted to assess. Now, because I don't have these chains on my arm saying that I have some kind of disability or something like that, they just didn't really understand what was going on. When I told them I've got an epilepsy, they said, well, you didn't fall on the ground or anything. Like, what's epilepsy?
So
they don't actually know what it is.
And bias.
I've heard, for example, I've had a couple of cases, and I've heard about people with epilepsy and the problems. A friend of mine fell off his bike, and then he was actually put in the back of the police wagon because they didn't understand it. And a lot of that comes down to education. But I think individually, with MS, for example, over the years, one of my main symptoms has been my bladder, because I get my problems in my lower part of my body primarily. And, so there's times when I've had to stop on the side of a road and have to go for a pee and stuff like that. And, at one time I got stopped, but the funniest of all, I remember I was at a football game, and I was at a football game, the Everton-Liverpool game, big derby, and it was an evening match, and I hadn't drunk any, because I was aware of my bladder. I was really careful about it. And I remember we were walking round the ground to go to our, to get into where we were going. And there's a lot of tension. I'm a big Everton fan and stuff like that. And it was a derby, and I suddenly realised, and around Everton's ground, it's all terraced houses. There's nowhere to disappear to go and have a pee, even if you could with 40,000 people. And I suddenly realised I needed to go to the toilet. And, you know, so I was in this terrible situation with thousands of people around me. And I said to a steward, I went up to a steward and I said, look, I need to go to the toilet, I'm desperate, mate. I've got multiple sclerosis, blah, blah, blah. And he was a nice lad, and he said, all right, that he starts in his Liverpool accent. And he's like, look, go and see the copper over there by the exit, or one of the doors, and he'll let you in. And I went up to this policeman, and I said to the policeman, I said, look, I've got multiple sclerosis, and I was limping, and, you know, the stress with it, you know, thinking you're going to wet yourself. And I said to the policeman, I said, look, mate, I've got multiple sclerosis, and I need to go to the toilet. And he said to me, he said, all right, lad. And he said, so he started trying to unlock the gate, and I couldn't wait. So I just pulled out my, you know, and started peeing in the corner. And then I thought he was going to arrest me. And then all I heard was this policeman go like, I was, oh, God, lad. And then my friend who was with me started to walk off. And I remember this policeman just grabbed my friend, and he said, no, you cover him on the left, and I'll cover him on the right. And then some bloke walked up and said, officer, I really need to go for a pee. Can I go as well? I remember the policeman just screamed in his face, saying, no, this is a medical emergency. And that was it. And then I finished off and I thanked him and he let me go. So I've had different cases, and I think, you know, if you can talk about it and you're in a rational state to talk about it, then sometimes they can be useful. But, you know, the hate crime thing is terrible. And I think a lot of it, again, comes back to education in schools and making people aware of these situations. So it must be awful if you get...
Sorry, we have another question.
There's another question, go on.
Which is actually really good, but they were great replies. From Ali Goodman, specifically for Damon, question, how do you feel about the lack of availability for cannabis oil for epileptic people?
Well, personally, I think it's something that needs to be given by doctors if they are going to do it. Because first, when I actually used it, I am actually a chemist. I studied analytical chemistry when I was about 23, and so when I actually tried it out one time, and I used it, and I used the quantities that they used in a research program that we had used. Personally, I found it doesn't work. It has no effect on me at all. Okay. But other people, it can actually have a negative effect. That's why I think not being able to just get it is quite important. If you can actually just buy it, it can actually have a negative effect on you. People don't actually realize that, because it can have some THC, tetrahydrochemical, cannabinol inside, which unless that's removed, and it can actually, THC is what actually makes you pass, like it's a high. It's a, whereas the other,
and that's in the oil, is
that
it?
would be in the oil. Okay. That can be, unless it's properly removed, it's not going to, it's going to be in the oil, and you're still going to just get high, or you're going to get it mildly high, or if it's like if it's sort of removed to, unless it's very well removed, there can still just be like a small amount inside there, and that can still have negative effects on you. That's why you can't get it. Just buying it is not a good thing. Just buying it over the counter, and most of these places, if you just buy from them, they don't remove it well enough. Right. And that is part of that's the problem.
It's a terrible, you know, the law on cannabis. Yeah, I wrote an article for The Guardian on this about, you know, because obviously it's, you know, people with MS benefit a lot because of spasms and stuff. Yeah. And I've always taken cannabis all my life, really, and I've always smoked it. Yeah. But it's a real difficult, you know, for like people like Damon, who, you know, because it's been proven, or, you know, they've got a new drug that's come out, Epidiolex, I think it is, for kids, which GW Pharma have produced, which is specifically for children with epilepsy, like Alfie Dingwall. But all of it has got a degree of THC in it. And like, you know, there's a drug for multiple sclerosis called Sativex, which GW Pharma produced, and its makeup is you have 2.5 milligrams of THC and 2.5 milligrams of CBD in each bottle, which is minimal really, but you have to have the two to work together to get the benefit according.
Okay, that's interesting. And I suppose what's really important to note is that medication is as unique as you are. So a medication might work for one person but not for another. And that's really important that we all, I don't know, I feel as especially using mental health medications, you know, it's a very respected thing that people make their own choices, but they're also informed, because a lot of medications have side effects.
Yeah, because the THC actually was negative for me. It actually had a very negative effect. Now the oil itself, with the specific, I can't remember the name of the chemical inside the oil that is actually, that's the positive thing that they actually say.
Right.
Now that I say had no effect on me, but the THC on there I know had a negative effect on me, because I did smoke weed once, a couple of times when I was younger, and that actually had some very, very bad effects on me.
Okay.
And it's, I mean, I just wasn't aware of what all these things were doing.
Yeah.
I was still at the young age, but it wasn't good for me, and it took me diving. It wasn't very good for me. So, but that's just me. Like you say, it's unique for each person, and that's why I think it's important to go to doctors.
Saying that, I think, you know, it's a fair point. You know, if you suddenly smoke a joint, you could, you know, knock you out. But I think the point is if the drug is administered in the right levels, and you know, and so you don't get the sort of stoned effect, or you know, because CBD is there to counteract the THC. It, you know, it's proven to work. You know, it's proven. Well, every case I've seen of children with epilepsy who've had the, you know, there's a program on TV the other night with the guy off Gogglebox. You know, a couple of Gogglebox. Their child has terrible epilepsy. He's 8. I think he was 18, but he was always having, you know, seizures here like I wouldn't, you know, say they were I'm not sure if they were grand mals or petit mals, or in fact they were all grand mals, I'd say. But then when they went to America and spoke to other kids who'd had similar cases, like Alfie Dingwell, which is in the news, their prognosis was so much better, but they might be having 80 fits or seizures, and they could halve those or cut them down to a minimal amount and a manageable amount, so they could live their lives. And I think it's huge, you know, for all of us, not just people with epilepsy and multiple sclerosis. I think cannabis offers such a way forward for the future for so many people, and in this country it's getting help. Any opportunity for us to truly find out what it's like is getting held down by this government or this establishment, and has been since the war on drugs was started in 1970.
I think the war on drugs probably, or drugs per se, is something that's really huge and quite on one level a bit outside of all of our, or maybe my scope, because it also very much ties into profit.
Very much.
And there's a lot of people making drugs and going, this is a wonder thing, and actually we're so different, we need different things. And you know, there are, with mental health, there's something called the 5 ways to well-being, and some people out there may be screaming, shut up Michelle, we don't want to hear about the 5 ways to well-being, but actually now there's 6, and the things are about taking notice, eating well, like you said, you know, eating good food and healthy food. Other things, learning something new, so keeping yourself alive, and like if you've got something like remunerating thoughts, trying to learn something new so that the remunerating thoughts go somewhere else and you're occupied somewhere else, can be quite important, or may not happen, it may not work. Going for a walk, doing something physical. So I think what, for me, and especially with mental health, there's this whole drugs world, which makes loads of money, and the drugs are very expensive. So Prozac, I know, and it was an article that was in the Guardian, Prozac does the same thing as walking for 30 minutes, and Prozac costs £150 a week. Walking for 30 minutes costs whatever your shoes cost. But I'm wondering if we should kick the debate on, should we?
Yeah, if you want. But the one final thing on it is, like they're saying, you know, the drug companies make a fortune. I mean, billions and billions are expensed. And there's one, you know, the one thing they're going on about drugs, and you go on about mental health. My nephew's a schizophrenic, and he has been for many years. Tried to kill himself, but luckily he didn't. And you know, he's always had problems. But I was recent readings. and this has been in the news quite a bit, but it's now getting a lot more coverage, is the fact that they're treating now people with not with epilepsy, with schizophrenia, with ecstasy and magic mushrooms, because it gives you, nor was it schizophrenia, I'm not sure it was other forms of mental health, but it was proving really beneficial, allowing them to come out of their depression or their, so whatever it might be. And so there's so many ways forward, but so
I think, have we lost James?
Things in how that.
I think we've lost a connection briefly with James. So what I thought I would do is maybe go back to employment.
Okay.
Because we talked a little bit before, didn't we? And I was really interested, so you trained to be a chemist.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was a chemist for 2 years, and then I just lost interest in chemistry. Okay, well,
sorry,
so
we've
Karen
got
talking.
James going, it's technology, isn't it? And technology also needs reasonable adjustment. Sometimes, I guess. And we don't know what's happened, and also maybe it's snowing in Devon. We're in London and it was beautifully sunny. I don't know, maybe it's not snowing in Devon, only you can tell us. So tell us a little bit. So you trained, but so you didn't finish education?
No, I did that. I finished the course. I finished and I worked as a chemist. Once I got myself qualified and worked as a chemist.
Okay.
I lost interest in chemistry, so I wanted to actually work in as a care work and sort of working with people more.
Right.
And then I did and then years after that, I did a degree in OT, occupational therapy. But chemistry, I couldn't. I just lost interest in that area.
And so did you manage to keep up work in occupational therapy?
Well, I worked for 2 years in OT and occupational therapy. Then after that I had to stop working, and they told me I can't work anymore, and they had just got me to stop. I mean, I can see. I don't think it would be sensible for me to actually work then. There are areas that I could probably try and go into, but the thing is, at that point, I was still having like 6 or 7 seizures a day, so it was a lot more intense. I'm on a medication that's got a bit more controlled, but I'm still having 1 to 2 seizures a day.
Right.
So it's still.
Because I suppose that's the other thing, isn't it? Lots of us have to use reasonable adjustments. So, like for my dyslexia, I have a program on the computer, and I do speech to text. However, the speech to text is pretty useless. If I say unique and it writes something completely different, and I don't know how to spell it, I can't actually change it. So without another human being with me, there's no help. But kind of, you know, one of the things, and we talked about it before the show, was the social model of disability and how you might have adjustments. They're called reasonable adjustments. And actually, for anyone out there, if you do have work, you can apply for access to work, which is where you get assessed by government people who come in and actually assess what you would need in place to enable you to do a particular job. That doesn't mean you'll get the whole package. And sadly, there's been a lot of cuts to access to work, and the smaller companies can't always match the government funding for the things you need.
Yes.
You know, and sometimes it might mean that somebody works with someone else and not loan, or, you know, there's lots of creative ways we could think about a reasonable adjustment. And it just occurs to me that obviously that, and we all know whether we feel safe working.
Yeah.
You know, and that's important too, and different things. But James, you've got some stories around work as well, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I worked for a disabled charity for many years, and they used to help people fill out DLA forms, and it, you know, that was hard enough not doing the job. You get the awards, but people get put through so many tests, and then in terms of work and the benefit, you know, the way austerity has been over the last 10 years, and the cuts that, you know, disabled people have had to face, both ones, you know, which has probably affected the ones with invisible disabilities much more, because people fail to appreciate or understand what mental health can do to people or what multiple sclerosis does. You know, I'm very visible, so I'm in a wheelchair, but 80% of my fellow MSers have relapsing remitting, and their condition can affect, they can have a relapse and suddenly be ill for a month, a few months, and then have to go back, and you don't notice it, and things like that. And then they suffer terribly, because then they can't work, and then they lose benefits or whatever, they can't apply a meeting, or adjustments aren't made, they can't get into a building. And I know so many things have changed since '94 with the Disability Discrimination Act, but we've gone backwards in many ways in terms of the last 10 years, in the way, you know, the bedroom tax has forced up to 50,000 people from their houses in London to live miles from their family. Or, you know, as I think we discussed before with the show, the rates of suicide amongst people. I know yourself, Michelle, but you've had close friends who passed sadly that way. And it's a big problem in society, and society seems to sort of ignore mental health and say they throw ways of solving it or more money at it. But the problem starts, why are 1 in 4 people having mental health problems? Why? And, you know, we don't answer the reason. All we do is just sort of sticking plasters over gaping wounds.
And I think one thing that is so important is when you're in poverty, actually, you have so much less access to anything. So in order to access 5 ways to well-being, you know, if it's learning, we have to pay for education. There aren't free courses out there. We've got another question coming in.
Are people different towards disabilities in smaller communities?
I can't answer that question. I live in London. I suppose.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I've just moved down to Devon, haven't I? So I lived in London for 30 years, but my mum was from down here in Exeter, so I lived here a couple of years, and, you know, knew the place for, you know, years coming down to see them. And yeah, but you know, everyone seems, you know, you don't really recognise it. I think it's like whatever community you live in, it's, you know, if you're confident, then you can get away with most things. But a lot of people with disabilities aren't. They're not confident themselves. You know, and you can feel very reserved. And I think it's down to gain. It's about educating people to say, hey, do you need a hand? How are you? Or say hello, and you know, just have a conversation. And because, you know, that's what communities are about. They don't have to be big or small. It's just common. It's just human. You know, just being a nice person, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Let's bring
sorry,
down.
no, I agree with that, because it took me quite a while to actually get used to telling people that I actually have epilepsy. But once I got comfortable with it, I actually found out what I have to do is when I move into a new, because I still live in a room at the moment. I don't. And one place I stay with, like 11 people in a house or something like that.
Right. So
when I moved in there, what I actually did, I thought, well, I'm going to tell everybody. And I made sure I met every single person in the house, and I told them exactly what I've got and what they're going to see and all that. And after that, people were completely fine. But I did find afterwards that there were people coming in and out and come out of the house. And sometimes it took me a while to actually tell them, and then they'll see me have a seizure and they get concerned. But yes, I think as long as you tell people, they'll tend to be more open about it, and they're more comfortable with it. And then I found when I was telling everybody, it was quite fine. Everybody was like, no problem about it. But you do have to see my seizures to be actually understand why people, I mean, I know I'd be a bit concerned if I saw somebody have a seizure like I do. So I can kind of understand where they are. But that's why I said I have to tell people. And I was quite terrified actually doing it. But I realized I have to do this, and I just made sure I tell everybody. And after a while, you get comfortable with it, and you get easy with it. And you find people don't really care, actually, after a while. As long as they know that you're going to have a seizure, they're actually quite comfortable with it. So that's what I do. But it took me a long time to get used to being able to do that.
And that's helpful too. I mean, with dyslexia, it took me a long time to tell everybody. And part of that is because growing up as a kid in school, I got beat up a lot, because I had to go to special classes to learn to read and write. So I didn't read until I was 9, and I was taken out of, I went to a mainstream school, so I was taken out of the class with other kids, and we were all called the thick kids. So actually it gave you a very rough, you know, you had to stand up for yourself basically, otherwise you got beat up. But I think it does scar you.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
then when you go on into adult life, and it's only, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, James, so there were no computers when I went to school. Had there have been, obviously my whole life would have been a different experience. But I think, you know, that sometimes your childhood isn't your adult life, and that's what's important, so making those changes. So like, that's why I have Dyslexic Rant on Twitter, because it's like, I don't care how I'm going to write this, I'm going to write it how I write it, not how society tells me I've got to write. And just say, look, this is who I am. And people can either go, you're a thick idiot, or actually engage with me. And I've had that on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I've had people go, you need to use a spell checker. It's like, actually, mate, I can't understand the spell checker. And the spell checker can't find my words because I don't know the first 3 letters, so I don't know enough for it to find it. You know, and it's a very invisible thing. But kind of like with universal credit or something like that, where people have to fill out a form online, that's very disabling for a lot of people.
Right, it's really difficult. We had to do, before I left London, there was a guy in the block, I lived in the block, and a guy in the block next door, and he sadly, he tried to commit suicide years back, mental health problems, and basically his asphyxiation had left him brain damaged, and he was in the wheelchair, and I had to fill his PIP form out. And his problem was he was very nervous about giving the information, because he'd given it to the guy I'd worked with previously. When I hadn't worked there, I'd set him up with it. And he was very nervous about letting anyone know that he'd done that and stuff like that, about that you'd think, oh my God, what'd you do that for? You know. And it's, you know, luckily I don't see it. I see everyone for the goodness in them, and I think, you know, it's not a mistake one makes. It's not, you know, it's an unfortunate event, and people have to realise that. No one is immune from disability, and no one is immune from making a mistake, and everyone should be in a position to accept that. And that is partly, again, wrong with our society, I think, because people seem to think they should have it all. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying it the way it is, because that's the way it should be done. But it's about looking out for one another.
Yeah, and also, I think one of the things that people really need to think about in whole in society is, one, we're going to move into a workforce that will be more automated, but plus, because people live longer, more people have acquired disabilities. And we've got a question coming in.
How do employers get away with rejecting people because of their disabilities?
I wish I knew, but I'll start this off, because I have some experience in this. I get interviews for CEOs of charities, because I've been a CEO of a charity. I get interviews, I get invited to them. I get told at the start of the interview, this interview is going to last for 45 minutes. And that's it. And that puts you off to start with. And also, I just think, how many people could I take to employment tribunal not being a lawyer and not actually having those skills? So employers just get away with it. They're tick boxes that they interviewed you. And I'm yet to find an employer who actually really gives me satisfactory answers as to why they don't give me jobs. And then
exactly, yeah. Because what I was actually experienced before, when I was still working, is I would try and tell the managers or something that what my case was. I found with some people, what they do is accept it and be more open-minded and considerate and say, don't worry, you can come in and still work. But other places, they'll find a reason why. And you'd actually think, well, that's actually not quite true. But the thing is, they can find a reason to sort of back it up. You know, they can say, well, they can't do this and they can't do that perfectly, and they'll find another reason, 100 million reasons. It's not because I've got epilepsy, it's because of all these other reasons. They know that if they had to say you've got epilepsy,
if they said that,
I'd be fired.
You could do that.
And they would be in trouble.
Yeah.
So they'd find 100 million different reasons why, but not epilepsy. And it's down to their heart, their kindness.
And prejudice in the employment world.
That's it. It is very much that.
Yeah, James.
Well, I think, there definitely is, and I think a lot of companies, then try to create programs for. At the same time, companies try and create programs for kids with learning disabilities. I set one up with L'Oreal years ago in Hammersmith. But a lot of companies, I don't know, because they've got to make reasonable adjustments. Is it worth it? And, will the person be off sick, etc. I've got an interesting story. Last year or the year before, I actually got approached by a production company about entering a cooking show on BBC One. And they approached me and they said, would you like to apply for it? I did the interview on the telephone, that's fine, got through that. And they invited me into the studio, and they invited me to bring to cook some food in advance and bring it in. So I brought it in, did my bit in front of the camera, I was fine with that. And I knew I'd done a really, really good interview. And they started, dropping sort of hints that the kitchen wasn't accessible and stuff like this. And they'd have to, if I got through to the next round, they'd have to come to my flat to film me there and to cook, which they did. They did that. So they came again, and this is the last audition, and they filmed me. And then I thought it was quite good, really good on camera. Cooked a lovely chicken curry with lemon rice in 45 minutes, which was pucker. And I did all the thing like that, and then they sort of and then again the woman dropped a hint about, again I would make sure we're all there, get all the rubbish done and stuff like this, which is fine, because I was looking to obviously make me feel comfortable. But when they refused me they left it to the last moment, and then they sort of sent me the Dear John email or whatever, and I was really pissed off, excuse my French, and because I'd missed out, I thought it was a good opportunity. And I later found out that when we watched the programme on TV, that the house everyone had to stay in, because everyone had to live in the house for a month. And I did, I was glad I didn't get in it, to be honest, but I still the candidates. And the standard of cooking, I was sure I would have won, is, because you should check out the disabledchef.com, it is a good site. And the fact the house was not accessible for someone in a wheelchair. And they wouldn't, and if I had to go there, I'd have to go there with my dear wife Julie, and then she'd have been my carer, and that would have changed the dynamics of the show. And I felt I got mixed out, because I thought it was a really good opportunity to show how positive disabled people can be, whatever ailment they have, that they can fight through it, and to give a really good example of where society has got it wrong. And I felt they used me, and I missed out on the opportunity. And I did have an article in The Guardian on it, but unfortunately we missed the deadline, so we couldn't publish it. And I wrote a piece on it, which is on the website.
That sounds brilliant that you did that, and it really highlights, doesn't it, all these shows like MasterChef, everything like that. Many people are excluded. So our talent. The kid with he won the Britain's Got Talent, didn't he? The guy. I can't remember what his name. I don't watch telly, but
this guy called Lost Voice guy, and he's a comedian. He does it all for his simulator, and so he's got a voice box, and he won it. But it was but they need more of it, because they need to show what people live with.
They need to show diversity, don't they, and also inclusion. How do we include everybody? Because one of the things I've fought for most of my life is inclusion. So when I run walks, I do quite a lot of public walks with history tours and everything, because I love that. But I always find accessible routes, and also if somebody needs somebody to audio describe the route we're walking on for them, things like that. But it's quite often, not even thought about how to include. And I think that goes for children as well.
It's funny, Dad moved back down here, as I said, it's to come here all the time, Mum and Dad were alive. So it's like a good 20 years since I've been sort of back here, or 10, 15 years. And all they've done is amazing, because I go with a hand cycle, as I said, I cycle with a hand cycle. And they've got all these amazing cycling routes, which are here, which are great, which are all pretty level. So it's amazing what some people can do if they put their mind to it. And you've got a government or a council prepared to sort of think, I'm going to make a difference.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's like there's a thing in Lambeth here, I'm going to give them a plug, Wheels for Wellbeing in Brockwell Park.
Yeah.
So they have cycles that everybody can use, and that includes people who say are on something like, there's a drug, lithium, which a lot of people with mental health issues are on, which makes people shake
Yeah.
all the time, like they've got Parkinson's. And a lot of mental health drugs, their side effects are Parkinson's, but it's from the drugs. And things like those cycles give people an opportunity to have a go at riding a bike, whereas they couldn't ride a two-wheeler. And I just think that whole thing, you know, you would think, wouldn't you, that society could be creative enough. And I think that's why I find Tate Modern so upsetting. This is an incredible, a creative institution, and you can't get a lift up to the 10th floor without waiting half an hour. In the end, when I was there the other week with a friend, I actually had to go and get a member of staff and say to her, we have waited 20 minutes for the lift. My friend is physically disabled, I have my own disability, we cannot use the stairs in any way. We ended up the old-fashioned way, going into a staff lift, you know. And years ago I remember going in all the cargo lifts and going in the back door because there was no access.
You can appreciate that in an old building. Like I've, you know, used to love going to the theatre in London, and you know, some of those old theatres, you do go through the tradesman's entrance sort of thing. But a modern building like the Tate, you know, when I remember when it first opened, I used to love going there. But it, you know, lift, that's disgraceful. That is disgusting.
In a modern building, brand new, that only opened, I think, do you remember when Tate Modern opened their extension?
No, I can't remember.
Yeah, and I think things like that, you know, architects should all be trained and educated in making a building inclusive. And even to the extent where a wheelchair user could use a slope.
Yeah,
you know, so that actually we could do it together, so we just don't have stairs.
Go on about that in terms of, you know, you got about the, you know, the art industry and stuff like that, and yeah, just building, it's just common sense, it's not rocket science. But it's like the, you know, it's like the fashion world as well. I did a fashion show years ago, one of the first inclusive disabled fashion shows, which had kids with mental health, kids with this, you know, in wheelchairs. And that's another thing that you don't ever get, you know, you're in a wheelchair, you have some ailment, whatever, I don't know. There's a lot of things, but you need to have all this inclusivity and to show this is a norm. This is all part of society. It's no different. Like if you're black, it's like, so what? You know, it doesn't matter what colour you are or what gender you might have to be. You know, it should be the same for disability. But we're still, in many ways, we're still the last unwashed and understand. And you know, and that has got to change in society. You know.
And I think it might be because we're not always at the table. We're excluded from a lot of work. No. You know, whether it's because they can't make the reasonable adjustments to enable people to be at the table. You know, how many
and I don't think we're radical enough. I think all the charities that look after a lot of disabilities, they are, you know, they're quite happy to toe the government line and not get involved. You know, we should be, when you look back at the beginnings of what you were saying about disability and about the Barclay movement, and the way, you know, they really got people behind them. They made a point. They protested. We've lost that ability, or, you know, we never get cheap, I think.
Well, I think there are still people out there protesting. Deepak's protesting quite heavily and actually has stopped traffic on Westminster Bridge on more than one occasion.
That's true.
And there's a lot of them doing that. However, a lot of them are being followed by the police, from what I understand. I mean, there used to be the Workhouse Cabaret that used to be run by a group of disabled people, which the last time I think it was run was probably 2 years ago. But I think you're right. I mean, I've got a thing here which is Piss on Pity, which was the National Disability and Arts Collection and Archive, run by SHAPE. And there is Disability History Month. But I think a lot of our charities, like I used to run a User Run charity, which unfortunately went pear-shaped. And part of that was, it was an experiment, so everybody who was employed to some extent either had lived experience of mental health or was a personal assistant or carer of someone who had. And unfortunately the charity got very, very popular. We had 25,000 people reach, and in fact the Guardian had us as one of their charities one Christmas. Anyway, it went pear-shaped. And one of the things I learned from that is that sometimes we implode. So I got seen as a person of authority due to cuts. So people were angry at me because of the cuts. I was seen as the authority figure because I was in charge and I was the manager, which actually I'm not the authority figure, but because I'm the only authority figure people know, everything got taken out on me. And
I'm thinking more like the things of like the Multiple Sclerosis Society, and, and I'm assuming there's a similar epilepsy society. So I'm sorry, I should be aware of. And
Epilepsy
dyslexia.
Society, yeah, there is. There are a couple of, there are actually quite a few epilepsy societies.
But are they helpful?
They actually, I did find them quite helpful because I just call them up and to try and find out a couple of things, and they're actually they talk about a lot of they're very comfortable. It's actually nice calling them up because they're sort of like trying to help you with this, and once you finish asking your question, they'd say, well, can we help you with this and can we help you with that?
But I suppose the question is, do they have people working with them who have epilepsy?
I'm not actually sure because I haven't actually asked that much to them, but I think they have been explained quite a lot because they did seem to understand what my issues might be and things like that. When I asked them questions, they did sort of have a good understanding about it. So, and that was Epilepsy Society, and then the epilepsy group. I didn't actually speak that much to them, but they did direct me to where we had meetings and things like that. So they're quite helpful like that.
So there's kind of peer support within that for people to share.
Yes, there is. There definitely could be more though, because I mean I've been trying, and I still am trying to try and find out what I can do here and where and what's available, but they just can't give you enough information.
I wouldn't question the MS Society in terms of their levels of, if you phone them up and they care, and they're really nice, lovely people. Yeah. Where I do question is, I think we should be much more hungry for change. Not just because, if you're in that situation, you don't want it to sit around and wait for 50 years. You're living with the disease, for Christ's sake. So you want things to happen now. And things like cannabis and stuff like this, which obviously there's a huge amount of documentary evidence that states towards it would work. I think charities like the Multiple Sclerosis should be mobilising with other charities to say, look, make a change. People need this help. It's been proven in America in so many states. Why don't we get into the 21st century, get going over here? But they don't. They just sit back, and we're left to pick up the pieces, and we're the ones on the coalface.
I mean, for me, one of the things about charity that I find really annoying is that a lot of charities don't have very high level support, and that's part of why I set up a charity. So I've got an MA in fine art and things, and I actually, being in mental health system, all the stuff.
You need people on the ground.
It was crap.
You need people on the ground. It's obvious, isn't it?
But it was like, here's some sugar paper for a 3-year-old with some poster paints. No, give me some proper canvases, paints, etc., etc. But also what I've noticed, and the charity I set up had all of that, what I've noticed since, because I've had to use services again myself because I haven't been very well, is that it's exactly the same as it was. And I do feel a lot of that is because we're not in charge. For example, I suppose it's sort of like recovery colleges, the big thing in mental health. Recovery colleges are all run by people who use services as volunteers. So most of the people are not paid, and none of the equipment is paid for, so that people could deliver high-end things. And to me, that just shows that actually they don't really value recovery college. It's just a sort of thing that people who use services can run for each other.
No offence to sound cynical, but it's it's the whole charity sector is like a new job sector. It's a job, and they just sort of that's how they look. We're just seen as customers, whatever. I just sort of think.
But worse than that, isn't it? Some of them, because they've got contracts with government, can't campaign on our behalf or with us.
That is disgusting. So what is our voice then with a charity? You make a subscription, you sort of sign off your legacy, that, you know, your mother died of multiple, or she died, you know, she leaves her legacy because her son had multiple sclerosis, whatever. And then you give that to that charity, and all they do is they don't go out there and say, "Oh, this has got to change," because you know, because they've got some contract with the government that sort of says you can't speak out. You know, no one's ever told me in my life. If anyone ever told me you can't say or you're not allowed to speak, I wouldn't have that. So why do we allow our charities to do that, and why do we allow the government or the establishment to force that upon us?
We've got another question.
Yeah, question. It's quite relevant. All that employers have to say is that they have their quota of disabled people going back.
So is
What
that
do you
more
say?
of a, well, I think that's probably what they do say, or they probably say we interviewed disabled people and here's our tick box of how many got interviewed.
Yeah, it's a tick box, isn't it? They, you know, they satisfy, they got, you know, sort of have, you know, like the BBC. I'm sure that's all I was a number at the end of the day, which I did. I took a, you know, and I took a Freedom of Information Act that I got about for this article, and they refused to give me the information because they said I wasn't a journalist. And they, you know, I could have gone round and round the bush, but you know, the fact was they were so uncooperative in giving me any information about the amount of people who are disabled who applied to these cooking programs, which I know they would have had.
Oh, we've got, do you want,
I think final question actually. It's more of a statement, but do you think smaller companies can be better towards the disabled than the bigger ones?
I just say I think it's so individual towards the company's culture. It doesn't matter whether it's small or big, it's about that relationship and probably the relationship you build up. But
yeah, I know. No, that's probably right. I mean, each, like smaller companies, I suppose it's just depends on the people that are there, really, that are in it. I mean, it's larger companies, I suppose, they can set rules and say that this is the way things are going to. Well, if it's, I mean, it's, they can set rules and be maybe sort of stick to those smaller companies. Maybe that can be much more flexible, perhaps. But it really does come down to the person who's asking, who's doing the interview, because it's I mean, that's what I've found is like, I had some fantastic managers who would go there and they'd say, look, don't worry, we can sort things out. Like my first occupational therapy job that I went to, they sort of said, okay, no problem, we can find you, we can do this, that's no problem. I went to another one for another job that was far more easy to get into. They said, no, sorry, you've got epilepsy, you can't, it's going to be a problem. But it just comes down to the person that's sitting behind the counter.
yeah, and in a way, occupational therapy is a bit like finding solutions around reasonable adjustments, isn't
Well,
it?
it is, that's what we do. I mean,
Exactly,
that's the whole-
so you kind of think, surely they can make that happen.
Yeah, no, it's yeah.
James,
I think-
very quickly, because we're
Yeah.
about to finish.
Well, you look at any big company and then look around that company and look at, this is not, you know, this is why a lot of people with invisible disabilities don't admit they've got them, like MS, or try and hide their epilepsy, whatever, or take drugs to control that, like my brother did and stuff like this. But is, you look around any big company, how many people do you see with a learning disability or in a wheelchair? Or, you know, it's very few, and that is the climate which continues to be engendered. And until you change that, then it, you know, nothing, you know, it's fine. All big companies should be made to have a program, I feel, for people with learning disabilities to work in. And I think smaller companies, you're right, it's all about what Damon said, it's all about the manager, whoever interviews, whether, you know, they like the person, but, you know, I think they'd probably be very, very supportive, but it's a bigger, you know, it's both areas, but it all goes back to education and people embracing what disability is and how skilled and what talents they're missing out on.
I want to bring up something, because I know we're near the end, but actually I had a cousin with learning disabilities, and she used to work as a cleaner in the NHS in the hospital until privatisation. And that was devastating, because privatisation didn't want to employ people with learning disabilities as cleaners on the wards. Now, she had done that job from when she left school until she was nearly 50. That meant she had self-respect, she had her own money and could do her own things. And, you know, so why, if it could happen then, can't it happen now? And I guess that's where I personally would like to see inclusivity really get there, because some people are really brilliant at doing certain things and making that happen, and enjoy making that happen. And we're all individuals. So any last closing?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone, you know, the opportunity to come on today, guys, and sort of chat with you about these issues. And I hope we had a lot of people watching. It's, you know, the show has been informative. It's been great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And lovely that you joined us from Devon.
Oh, yes, the same. I've really enjoyed meeting up with everyone, and I'm sure this is going to be useful for other people to listen to. Thanks.
And I think we should say a big thank you to Julian, who put it all together and set all this up, and to Jill, who's we'll do a round of applause for everybody who's watching. Okay. We haven't got question time throwing flags or anything, and my name's not Fiona Bruce, but you know, maybe it's somebody else. But I guess on that note, we'll say goodbye and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.